Well, actually, there's one more announcement I forgot before I begin the sermon. As you know, most of you know, we have stewardship time is coming up here pretty quick, and the council came up with an idea that I think is going to be really slick. What's going to happen is we're going to have the congregation give the church money, and they're going to make up like these certificates, or maybe little cards, and we'll give you those cards, and then what will happen is when you die, you'll have those cards, and you'll be able to get into heaven faster. So, you give us 40, 60 bucks, you get the certificate, and then you kind of get a little one-up on other people. I think it's going to be a pretty neat system. I'm pretty excited about it.
Hey, Brian. Hey, up here.
Yeah, hi, Colin.
Say, I got a question about your idea.
Yeah.
Like, if I gave you like 20 bucks, how far would I get?
Well, I think 20 bucks, like a couple hours. I mean, 20 bucks is good. It's better than nothing, but you're not going to get very far.
I could be in heaven for 2 hours?
Yeah.
Well, what if I give you like 500?
500 bucks?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be better. Like, a couple days, I think.
Okay, I don't think I like your idea very much.
Oh, well,
I think it kind of stinks. I think you should go back. I think you should go back to the board.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure who gave you a microphone.
So. Yeah, okay, thanks. I love you, though.
Thank you, Colin. No. Of course, we're joking that as any of you who took a Western Civ class or grew up Lutheran, you know what I'm talking about is selling indulgences. This is what started the Lutheran Church. This idea that God's grace could be bought and sold, that salvation is something that could take place through a human transaction. This is what got Luther so riled up. And we can kind of sniff and joke about, that silly idea they had 500 years ago, but the truth of the matter is, deep ingrained in every human psyche is this idea that somehow we can have power over the system. Somehow we can kind of put God in the back seat and it'll be up to us. That's what law-based faiths do, and that's the whole idea, is that you follow the law, so it's your agency. You have control. You do A, B, and C, and then you'll get salvation. I mean, it's just as crass as just giving money and thinking you're going to get a certificate. It's that same idea. Well, somehow I can have power over it. And the reason why I bring this up is when I read the gospel for today, I had a really hard time getting around that way of thinking as I read it. I read the gospel and I just started getting an envelope, metaphorically, in my hand, and I started to run the numbers, trying to figure out, well, if I give away this and if I've done that, well, how is God going to like me then? And that's a tempting way to read this gospel. I mean, it's misreading it, and you're missing a couple of key passages, but because that desire for control is so much in our heart, we read it that way. And that's a trouble, because the law only goes to two places. When you start thinking in that law version of religion, either you are going to, one, compare yourself to others. It's like that old joke, the two campers in the woods, and they see the bear coming, and one of the campers goes down and starts tying his shoes real quick, and the second camper says to the first, hey, you can't outrun a grizzly bear, and the first one says, I don't have to outrun a grizzly bear, I just have to outrun you. You know that joke? Yeah. Anyway, it's the basic idea, except for in our spiritual life. We think, well, I don't have to follow the law completely, I just have to do it better than the people around me. And so then, that's easy. I mean, anybody can look around and find somebody doing worse than they are. The corrupt politician can look at the guy who runs a strip club and say, hey, at least I'm not that guy. The guy that runs the strip club can say, well, hey, at least I'm not dealing drugs. The guy dealing drugs can say, hey, at least I'm not stealing from anybody. The thief can say, hey, at least I've not killed anybody. And the murderer can say, hey, at least I'm not a politician. It's a cycle. We can always do that. It's very easy for us to find somebody else that isn't doing as well as we are. And down that path is all of that ugly hypocrisy of the church. Those sanctimonious people, the holier than thou, all of that comes from that desire to just be better than your neighbor. So that's the first way. The second path where that leads is despair. And if you take this gospel seriously, as we should, but if you don't see the grace in it, well, then you have to start to really take stock and start giving stuff away. So you give away your mugs. I've got dozens of mugs. I've never bought a mug. I don't know where all these mugs come from. I've got dozens of mugs. I can get rid of them easy. So I get rid of my mugs. I can get rid of my kids' toys. I don't play with them, so get rid of those. I get rid of my wife's shoes. But that's not going to be enough. Eventually I'm going to start giving away my own stuff. And so finally I give away my shin gel and my back shaver and my little porcelain umbrellas, whatever it is for you. And then give away those things, but that's not going to be enough. And so you give away your motorcycle and your car, but that's not going to be enough. And so you tear the cabinets out of the walls, and you tear the carpet off the floor, and you tear the fans off the ceiling. Give those away, but that's not going to be enough. So you just get rid of the house. You sell it, you start living on the streets, but that's not going to be enough because you still own your clothes. So you give away all your clothes, and you wear a plastic garbage sack with a rope tied around it, but you still own the rope. It's not going to be enough. So maybe you go around naked, fine, but then every time you take a bite of food, you own that food. I mean, there's no end to it. And that just leads to despair. And that just leads to people throwing their hands up and saying, I am done with this angry, fierce God that is always on my back about everything. And there's a lot of people in this world who have already done that, who have turned their backs on the church because they understand it only from that perspective of law, of a God who is never satisfied, of a God who just wants one more thing, to just squeeze you out of all of the pleasures and joys of life. But that's not what this gospel is saying. This gospel is not about law. I mean, the key to reading it is reading that last line. Well, not the last line, but the last thing he says to that young man. Jesus says, go sell all your things, give the money to the poor, and then come follow me. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying the exact same thing to that rich young man that he said to Peter, that he said to Matthew, that he said to Paul, for that matter, that he said to Moses and David, for that matter, that he says to you and me. What Jesus wants is faith. And the faith that isn't about what you're doing or not doing, a faith that's about a 6-year-old boy on the floor of his bedroom praying for grandma and grandpa and his dog and his brother and his sister and the goldfish and the teacher and the kid that had the runny nose at school, just listing it down for minutes, trusting perfectly that there is a God who is listening. Faith is my grandpa Pete, praying after church before we had our big Sunday brunch, and the words, the way he spoke to his God, you know he was talking to someone that he knew intimately. Faith is a woman, a young mother in a hotel chapel, one of those spare, cold, little sanitized places, but it's quiet, and praying that desperate, white-knuckled prayer for her baby. Faith is a middle-aged man who has lost his way and is crying out to God, where are you now, God? I mean, that's faith. That's what God is calling this young man to. He's not saying go and do as much as he's saying is come and follow and be a part of our community and get to know me and let me get to know you. Love and be loved. Be part of this Christian revolution. Be part of the joy of it, the peace of it. And yes, for that young man, he needed to let go of something. All of us do. And for some of us, that is wealth. I mean, there are many of us who hold on tight to our stuff. Because wealth gives power, and it gives security, and it gives safety, it gives comfort, and these are all powerful things. And so we are holding on tight to those gold bars in our hands. But for some of us, it's anger, it's resentment, it's jealousy. Some of us, it's fear. Some of it's the mighty God of the television. Some of us, it's our lusts. Some of it's our unhealthy relationships. Whatever it is, we all, rich and poor, we all have something we're grasping on tight into that hand. And Jesus is saying, let it go so you can hold on to mine. That's the promise. That's the hope. That's the calling. And then the real good news, the real promise of grace comes right in the middle there in verse 27. Because it happens to all of us. We think we've let go, and we think we're holding on tight to Jesus. And then we walk along, we take a look at our hand, and we realize we have 30 bars of silver, or we have that resentment towards our family, or we have whatever it is holding in that hand instead. And we get filled with that disgust with ourselves. That idea that there's just no way. Every time I try, I always seem to fail. Well, the promise is, for humans, it is impossible. For mortals, we are always going to grasp onto the wrong thing. But for God, all things are possible. So again and again and again, God will pry our fingers loose of whatever it is that we are holding on tight to. And he will once again put Jesus' hand in ours. That, dear friends, is grace. And that is what we are all about. Amen.